this time. All right, let's get over to David Hammer, who is in Bridge City right now.
Yeah, he's looking at the power situation and that tower that was down. David?
Yeah, Katie and Eric, we're actually here. I'm with City Council President Helena Moreno from New Orleans City Council, but we're here in Avondale on the West Bank in Jefferson Parish. But we're here because behind us we see a very key part of the transmission system for Entergy. It is completely knocked over by the force of Hurricane Ida's winds, and we believe that there's another tower that's even taller that would have connected the lines and then gone across the river to Harahan and fed the East Bank for power. So this is very important, and Helena, you've been in touch with Entergy. I have too. They've been explaining to us why these 8 transmission points that come into the city being down all at once has left us like an island. We are without any power coming from outside, from MISO, the network, regional network that supplies us with additional power. Can you talk about what you've learned and what the plan is now from Entergy?
Sure. So first, David, funny to find you here. We actually were coming to this area because I'd heard so much about this transmission tower that had fallen in Avondale that holds some of the transmission lines, or one of the transmission lines, main ties, coming in from 9 Mile, which is one of the power plants over here. So driving by, obviously we saw this. I think this is part of one of the towers. It looks like one of the bridges up to one of the towers, and that's when I ran into you and we started talking about what's happening. So yes, you're correct. There are 8 transmission ties that come into the city. All 8 are inoperable at this point. Entergy right now has helicopters, has drones, has people, all assessing what went wrong with transmission and how quickly that can be repaired. And look, I just want to be very honest with the people of New Orleans. I got off the phone with the Entergy engineers earlier today, and they told me that the assessment alone of the transmission failures, that alone could take up to 4 days. So up to 4 days of just assessing the damage before it could be repaired. So then there are, options. First, can those transmission lines be fixed? And look, we don't need all 8. We don't need all 8, but what lines can be fixed? Maybe some just tripped, right? So that would be a much easier fix. So can those be repaired? Also, can we get a line coming in from 9 Mile, one of the lines fixed here, and then potentially get 9 Mile powering New Orleans along with the New Orleans power station in New Orleans East? That would provide us over 600 megawatts of power in the city of New Orleans, our own little off-the-grid self-power generation to keep us afloat. This won't make us perfect.
Idea, 600 megawatts is enough for essentially emergency services and things like that, critical services, not necessarily to power everybody's house.
You got it. So, and not to mention, we still have, people who are deciding to get out of town and people who evacuated for the storm. So we don't have everyone in the city. But yes, 600 plus megawatts would keep us, for lack of a better term, afloat.
And to your point about the assessment process taking 4 days, I spoke to Philip May with Entergy, and he said that there's a number of parallel tracks going, looking at different options for how to address this. And this option that you were talking about of doing our kind of own little internal energy generation process using 9 Mile 6 is being done separately from their attempt to get one of these 8 towers that bring in power from outside our area back online. But they say that's their primary goal. So how long is it going to take for them to make the decision one way or another?
So that was one of the questions that I had earlier, and we're about to actually get on another call at 2:30 where we plan on pressing him even more about, like, why can't we just move forward with getting the NOPS 9 Mile option just going, let's get going on that. But I just want to also reiterate that there's additional tracks because there's also assessments happening of the nuclear facilities that generate the power that comes into New Orleans, that then goes to the big transmission lines, that then of course goes to the smaller lines, the poles and wires outside of your house. And so many of those are damaged as well. So really we're talking about the power generation of the nuclear and natural gas plants. We're talking about the big transmission lines that bring it from those plants over to the smaller wires that bring it to your house. there's damage on all three levels,
Yeah.
and there are assessments happening on all three levels, but it seems like the assessment that's going to take the longest is on the transmission side.
Now, do we know how critical this particular downed transmission tower is? Has Entergy told you that there's a part of it or a larger structure that's actually in the river? Because they were telling me that there was a downed tower that was 450 feet tall, was highly engineered, had just been inspected and cleared in the last year. This doesn't look like that.
Well, what I had heard is that there was an incredibly heavy tower, thousands of pounds, that had collapsed. This is why I'm saying I don't think that this is it. I think this is a portion of it, potentially a bridge leading to it, that collapsed. And
Well,
you know,
we should point out that we are right on the other side of the levee from the Avondale shipyard, and then directly across the river we can see the tall tower
Right.
that receives this power from this side in Harahan. So that means that we believe that there's a taller tower that may have fallen that we just can't see yet on the other side of this levee, right?
And I would say that if that is the case, if there is this tower that we've heard about and heard Entergy talk about that has fallen, that's thousands of pounds, I can only imagine that that is going to be really a lengthy fix to try to restore that.
There's also the question of the cost for this, and I know there's going to be time for this later, but maybe we can tell people, because I think a lot of our viewers are concerned because they know they've been paying higher assessments to Entergy, higher fees to Entergy to recover from previous storms, to harden the system,
No doubt.
hardening for distribution lines, which are the internal poles that bring it from the transmission system, that brings it in from outside and then distributes it to your house. Has there been enough focus on hardening the transmission that brings it in the first place that makes any kind of problem with distribution irrelevant if we lose it?
So I guess what I find a little bit frustrating about this is that my office, and through my chief of staff as well, Andrew Tuazolo, we have been like waving our hands about this for quite some time, including with our MISO partners, really pushing on that reliability piece on transmission, sending letters, whatever it takes. What I find unfortunate is that so often it takes something like this for changes to be made. So I'll tell you this, obviously we're in close contact with our partners at FEMA. When I was alerted of what had happened with this massive failure of transmission, when Deanna Rodriguez called me yesterday a little bit after 6 o'clock and gave me that this was really a catastrophic failure, I made 2 calls. First was to the mayor to let her know what had happened and that we had lost all transmission power coming into the city of New Orleans. And my second call was to Cedric Richmond so that he would know that we absolutely would need some federal help to pay for not only, of course, the restoration piece, but what about the future?
Yeah, and to point out to our viewers, Cedric Richmond is the senior advisor to President Biden, former congressman from New Orleans. He's now in the White House, in the East Wing or the West, I believe the West Wing, right, with direct access to the president.
And in fact, he set up a phone call with the mayor and the president today at like 12:30. They got on the phone. And this is the main issue. And how are we not only going to restore power fast, or as quickly as we can, but what comes next? You know, there have been so many conversations about, do we bury the line? So I've already told Andrew, please get with our advisors, our utility advisors, and start asking them to start preparing those independent analysis about which of these 8 lines need to be buried. Look, this may have been something, though, that was just such a strong, horrible, storm in this area, what hit, that maybe nothing could have prevented it, what went wrong. But for all 8 to fail, I just think that I'm just wondering whether this could have been prevented, and that's what we're going to be looking into. So yes, the focus is on absolute restoration. That is what we're all about right now, but more will follow with investigations and getting to the bottom of how this happened and what can be done better by the company.
Yeah, and to be clear, Councilmember Moreno is the person who regulates Entergy through the city council, which is why she's over here in Jefferson Parish looking at this, because they report to her essentially as a monopoly serving the city of New Orleans. But Helena, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you, a broadcast veteran here, doing a two-person live shot here, knowing exactly where to look and what to do.
Well, and I'll just say this, I certainly understand the job that you're doing and that your photographer is doing and everyone back at the station. And I know it's super long hours, but the public absolutely needs you all to continue putting the information out there. And I just very much appreciate your work.
You're welcome, and thank you for your time. Right now, we're just going to send it back to the studio and see if you have any questions, but we'll be following this up during the course of the day. And I also have an extended interview with Philip May from Entergy explaining some of the technical aspects of why this transmission system failed and what they're doing to try to rectify the situation as quickly as possible.
I mean, again,
back to you in the studio.
For anybody just joining us, David, did you get a real estimate on when we could see power back?
There was no commitment to any kind of timeline. Councilmember Moreno just mentioned that there's a 4-day assessment period just to do the assessment. Philip May from Entergy in his phone interview with me talked about a week. He threw out a week kind of in passing as he's saying that they're going through this process. And that appears to be kind of the timetable for just getting some kind of quick fix online. So we need to be thinking about days here before they even get the first bit of power going. Councilmember Moreno talked about the idea that they can get some kind of initial amount of power going with 600 megawatts. That would be enough to run critical infrastructure and stuff like that, but not enough to power everybody's homes by a long shot.
And can you ask her quickly about the status of our hospitals? I know that the water situation and the power situation are both an issue for them. Are they in okay shape, and how long will they be in okay shape?
Sure, yeah. Katie Moore in our studio is asking about the situation with our hospitals. Water, power is a major issue for them. How are they in good shape right now, and how much longer will they be?
Sure. So, we've got Louisiana National Guard in with the city of New Orleans. They've been part of our EOC. So what they've been doing is monitoring fuel levels of their generators, of hospital generators, checking into nursing homes, things like that, to make sure that everyone has the appropriate amount of fuel. And they're making requests from the state to bring in that appropriate amount of fuel. So from our meeting that we had today, our last EOC meeting, which was roughly 10 o'clock, so far, everyone's okay.
Okay, and feeling like it can hold on for how long?
Well, obviously we've got the state coming in with additional fuel and things like that. I mean, if no one came in with anything, it would be one thing, but that's not what we're hearing. We're not hearing like, oh my gosh, there's not going to be anything for New Orleans or anything like that. That is not the case by any means. So
right.
so
if
far
you're
everything seems okay.
having a flashback to 16 years ago with
that's not what we're seeing at all. I mean, this is, as far as resource-wise, I'll just say this. I mean, doesn't even compare to Katrina. I was here 16 years ago. I mean, stuff is flowing right in, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we even have people already prepared coming in with, ready to cook for people in New Orleans, tons of water. We can't keep up with the amount of people wanting to come into the city to help. And it's because they can get here. We're not covered in floodwater like we were 16 years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. Back to you in the studio.
All right, David, thank you so much. And thank Councilmember Moreno for joining us as well. Some important updates there.